Welcome to the Agility in Real Life podcast, Take 5 in Real Life. Now your hosts, Mike Studeman and Jeff Lee.
Hi, and welcome back to the take5IRL podcast. I'm Jeff Lee, a partner at agilityIRL and one of your hosts for this podcast.
And I'm Mike Studeman, the other partner at agilityIRL and co-host of the Take 5 in Real Life podcast. Jeff, let's talk about transparency. Let's talk about I have some things I need to be transparent with you about. No, it's not going to be that type of podcast. Specifically, let's talk about transparency as it relates to the product backlog. And now, as Scrum practitioners, we know that transparency is an empirical process control. So I want to narrow down our discussion to how do we make the product backlog transparent? What's your favorite way to make the product backlog transparent?
Yeah, so when I think about the transparency of the product backlog, product owner obviously understands it really well. They own it. The rest of the Scrum team understands it really well. They're in it a lot, right? Almost every day, looking at, refining, doing all these things. But how do you, the transparency outside the team is the tricky thing. Giving all of your stakeholders access to the tool that you have the product backlog in is not going to provide you transparency. It's just going to give you a lot of questions about, what in the world is an epic and all these other sorts of things that, are tool specific things. And so it's really incumbent on the product owner to find a way to take the information in the product backlog and share that in a way that your stakeholders can consume it. My favorite way to do that is a roadmap, right? What's coming up? When is it coming up? Your stakeholders, most of them don't need to know every single product backlog item that's in that list, but they need to have things disseminated at a slightly larger view so they know what's coming up and they can give input to prioritizing. And is this in the right spot? Do I have concerns about this as a stakeholder? I want to share with the product owner and try to influence them to move my favorite thing further up in the backlog. So I think a roadmap is fantastic for that. Mike, what are ways that you would suggest to a product owner to give more transparency?
Yeah, a couple of ways. First of all, plus one to using a roadmap to provide transparency. Other ways to do it, even if you're going to store your product backlog in a tool doesn't give you transparency. So I encourage product owners to extract some portion of the product backlog from the tool, share it out with the stakeholders in some other way. Post it on a wiki, post it on a SharePoint site, email it out, review it during the sprint review, invite stakeholders to product backlog refinement. Once again, not ideal, but you have to try to defeat the lack of transparency that comes from having your product backlog in a tool. Another way, and this is probably a future episode of Take 5IRL, if there's interest, let us know at the bottom if you're interested in this, is user story mapping. That can provide some good transparency. In fact, Jeff, you have an interesting take on a user story map. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I think that this might get people a little piqued for that future episode. You want to talk about a user story hamburger?
Yes, there is a user story mapping is something a lot of people are familiar with. There's another technique referred to as the user story hamburger, which is a similar idea of taking, a big effort and breaking it into layers. So you think of your hamburger, you have the ketchup layer and the pickle layer. How many pickles do you need on your hamburger to get to a minimally viable hamburger? That's an existential question that we probably can't answer on this podcast, but we do have an upcoming class where we'll be talking about the user story hamburger, the professional Scrum product backlog management skills. I did screw up the name of the class there. It's new from scrum.org, kind of an exciting new offering, a one-day class to help product owners to manage their product backlogs more effectively, understand stakeholders, number of techniques to help out with, very tactical class to give you product owners things to take back to work right away, improve the way that they work with their product backlogs.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting development. And as you know, in working with our coaching clients, one of the areas that needs a lot of work in practicing Scrum in the real world is this whole area of product ownership, product management, and a key part of that is product backlog management. So I really encourage people to take a look at the learning objectives for the course and sign up soon for one of your courses, Jeff.
All right. Thanks for the pitch, Mike. And
yeah. Hey, and before we should kind of wrap this up, though, because I'm kind of thinking about hamburgers now.
Sorry about that. No hamburgers will be served in the virtual version of the classes. I can't tell you in advance what will be happening when we get those in person.
Sounds good. Check out the class in spite of the lack of hamburgers.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
The product vision for Take 5 in Real Life is to provide members of the Agile community with an idea that they can incorporate into their daily lives to make them more effective. We thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.